We'll go ahead and get started here. Today we have the budget. We're going to have Merle present here in just a few minutes. Just as a heads up, I did change the agenda this week. I added on, I'm sure you saw in the Senate calendar, but I added Senate Bill 143 on for tomorrow and added 130, which was Senator Tyson's county bill, on after our budget recommendations on Thursday. Next week, I am not planning on meeting on Monday the 13th, but we'll look at doing 142 on Tuesday, 132 on Wednesday. And if I don't get a bill from Fed and State that's possibly coming, we will hear the Treasurer's bill on the 16th. I do not plan to meet on Monday the 20th, but I'm going to do on call the chair the 21st, depending on the Fed and State bill that's coming. With that out of the way, we'll turn to Merle Riddell with research for a presentation on the budget.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Merle Riedel. I'm a fiscal analyst with Legislative Research, and today we'll be reviewing the budget request and governor's recommendation for the Kansas Department of Transportation. I will be referring to a document you should see in front of you with a blue band across the top that says Kansas Department of Transportation. We'll start with page 1. Just as a general reminder, the Kansas Department of Transportation is a cabinet-level agency headed by a secretary appointed by the governor. The purpose of KDOT is to coordinate the planning, development, operation of various modes of transportation systems within the state. KDOT has administrative and planning responsibilities for aviation, highways, public transportation, railroads, waterways. However, the primary effort and the large majority of expenditures are related to the state's highway system. If we move on to page 2, just want to quickly note a unique aspect related to capital improvements for this agency. Looking at the top, state operations and capital improvements. In a state agency budget, state operations include operating costs for salaries and wages and other expenditures. Other expenditures include contractual services, commodities, capital outlays. Agency budgets also include separate categories for aid to local units of government and other assistance. KDOT budget differs slightly from other agencies in that expenditures typically considered state operations are included with budgeted capital improvement expenditures. So if we look at the beginning on the first page, you'll see a really large number, usually 1.3 billion or 2 billion under capital improvements. That's because really all the highway projects are categorized as capital improvements. For many agencies, it's really just expenditures relating to building improvements. So we're going to move past the executive summaries and we're going to go on to page 4. On that page, you'll see a table that lists expenditures and financing. So you'll see a layout of expenditures for the agency by category. Towards the bottom, you'll see a line chart that shows the 10-year spread of total expenditures from FY 2015 to FY 24. The Kansas Department of Transportation reportable operating expenditures increased $888.5 million from FY 2015 to FY 22. The majority of expenditures are for letting construction projects that preserve, modernize, or expand roads and bridges that compose the state highway system. Construction projects have averaged 75.7% of the agency's annual budget since implementation of the Ike Transportation Plan in FY 2021. Other significant expenditures include aid to local governments, primarily from the Special City and County Highway Fund, and routine maintenance of the highway system. We're going to move on to page 5, and we'll dig into the FY 2023 analysis. You'll see at the top is a line called Legislative Approved. This is what the legislature approved for the FY 2023 budget for the Kansas Department of Corrections. Subsequent to last session, there has been no changes by the legislature to that amount. So you'll see item 1 states no changes. The next you'll see a series of adjustments, item 2 through 20, and those are adjustments that the agency is requesting for that approved amount, which results in their revised estimate for FY 23. So looking at the bottom of page 5, the agency submits a revised estimate of $2.8 billion, including $2.3 billion from the State Highway Fund in expenditures for FY 2023. This is an all-funds increase of $778.4 million, or 38%, and a State Highway Fund increase of $661.3 million, or 40.4%, above the FY 2023 approved amount. The revised estimate includes 2,283.3 FTE positions, which is a decrease of 14 FTE positions below the 23 approved number. So now we'll get into some of those adjustments. Looking on page 6, item number 2, supplemental. The agency does request one supplemental. The agency requests $8.8 million, all from the State Highway Fund, for increased capital improvement costs for buildings in FY 2023. And just as a note, the agency does maintain a substantial number of buildings throughout the state, about 980 buildings. These include shops, offices, labs, various support structures to store equipment and chemicals. Agency notes a nearly 50% increase in materials and services for building projects due to inflationary effects, and requests additional funding to supplement construction of the District 1 headquarters in Topeka, sub-area modernization efforts, and routine rehabilitation and repair of buildings. Moving on to item 2, salaries and wages. The revised estimate includes an increase of $1.4 million, all from the State Highway Fund, for salaries and wages expenditures in FY 23. This funding includes a partial year increase to address staffing needs in traffic safety, engineering, information technology services, and financial management. The request includes a net decrease of 14 FTE positions, which results in a decrease of 54.5 FTE positions in maintenance and construction programs, partially offset by an increase of 40.5 FTE positions in administration and transportation planning and modal support programs. Agency indicates the position decrease is due to difficulties filling vacant equipment operator and engineer positions. Moving on to item 4, under heavy equipment, the revised estimate includes a decrease of $4.4 million for replacement of heavy equipment, primarily dump trucks for highway maintenance in FY 23. This is really related to the agency notes equipment was purchased in FY 22 above the original estimate in anticipation of pending supply chain disruptions, which reduces the need in FY 23. So they purchased more of the dump trucks in FY 22, more than they had anticipated, largely because they were projecting some potential cost increases, which reduces the need to purchase these in FY 23. Item 5, the agent's unmanned aerial system. Revised estimate includes an increase of $300 million for the purchase of UAS to support highway and bridge inspections. Item 6, engineer contractual services. The revised estimate includes an increase of $19.1 million in contractual services for FY 2023. These services include and support planning and inspection of highway modernization and preservation projects. This is largely related because this is the 3rd year of the Ike Transportation Plan, and many of the projects or the level of projects that are being let has increased, which increases the demand for engineering contractual services. Item 7, transportation technology development. The revised estimate includes an increase of $10 million as aid to local governments for technology development. This includes funding for broadband infrastructure, broadband expansion, and expenditures from the Technology Development Fund for development of innovative technologies in vehicular and air transportation. Item 8 is aviation. The revised estimate includes an increase of $2.6 million for aviation subprogram in FY 2023. The increase is attributable to the addition of $5.5 million from the State Highway Fund for development of UAS capabilities among airports. The increase is offset by a decrease of $2.9 million from the Kansas Airport Improvement Program, which provides grants to local airports. Item 9, public transit. The revised estimate includes a decrease of $7.8 million in operating expenditures for the public transit of persons with disabilities, older adults, and other members of the general public. This is largely related to a decreased amount of federal funding for that program. Rail Service Improvement Fund, the revised estimate includes an increase of $13.3 million to rehabilitate and make safety improvements to railroads. Item 11, Short Line Rail Improvement Fund, the revised estimate includes an increase of $2.2 million for short line rail improvements. These are primarily unexpended funds carried over from FY 2022. Item 12, local project. The revised estimate includes a decrease of $4 million as aid to cities and counties through the federal fund exchange program for preservation and improvement of local roads, streets, and bridges. Item 13, highway maintenance contractual services. The revised estimate includes a decrease of $1.4 million for contracted highway maintenance services. This involves a variety of expenditures, such as equipment rental, litter removal, weed spraying, various functions that are contracted for maintaining the highway. Construction. Item number 4, we begin to get into the construction expansion capital improvements. Again, this is where the bulk of the funding for the Department of Transportation resides, and this relates to the highway projects. The revised estimate includes an increase of $478.2 million in capital improvements for expansion projects. So these are projects that expand or create new portions of the road and highway system. The increase is primarily due to increased non-interstate capacity projects and interstate capacity projects. These types of projects would include the I-235 in Sedgwick County, US 54 and US 69 improvements. Item 15, construction preservation. The revised estimate includes an increase of $87.6 million in capital improvement preservation projects to maintain roads and bridges in their as-built state. Item 16, construction modernization capital improvements. The revised estimate includes an increase of $38.3 million in capital improvement modernization projects to bring roads up to current standards. So this often involves implementing contemporary safety measures. So it is an improvement of the road, but it is not expansion of the road. Item 17, construction local projects. The revised estimate includes an increase of $21.2 million for capital improvement local projects. This is attributable to increases for the City Connecting Link program and federal aid projects, which is partially offset by a decrease in the local bridge transfer program. Item 18, buildings capital improvements. The revised estimate includes an increase of $1.5 million in capital improvement expenditures for buildings. The increases primarily include sub-area modernization and partial support of land purchase for relocation of the District 1 headquarters in Topeka. Item 19, debt service. The revised estimate includes an increase of $95.7 million, all from the Highway Bond Debt Service Fund. And then you'll see item 20, addresses a series of other adjustments, including gasoline, increases in gasoline and diesel fuel. Then we move on to page 8, and we can take a look at the governor's recommendation for FY 2023. Governor recommends $2.8 billion, including $2.3 billion from the State Highway Fund in expenditures for FY 23. The decrease is $3.5 million, all from special revenue funds, below the FY 2023 revised estimate. The recommendation includes 283.3 FTE positions, which is unchanged from the agency's request. So what was the significant difference? The governor is recommending a decrease of $3.5 million, all from the Special City and Highway County Fund, and this is related to a revised highway revenue estimate. So the revenue estimate is decreased by $3.5 million. And that's largely attributed to an estimated decrease in fuel consumption and miles traveled. And Mr. Chair, that completes FY 2023, so I can stand for questions or move on to FY 2024.
Committee questions. Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It might seem like a minor question, and it's probably for the department, but you did touch on the weeds program, and I would dispute that they're not spending any money on it, especially on noxious weeds. So if the department could speak to that when they come up, that would be great. Thank you.
Merle, do we know how much they spent on the transportation planning and tech development last year?
I don't know off the top of my head how much was expended in FY 2022 actuals, but I can look that up, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Committee, further questions? Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. About the decrease of funding of $3.5 million for the special city and county highway fund. I understand you said that's because of less use of gas, is that right?
Correct. So that each year, the Highway Revenue Estimating Group takes a look and does their best to project what the fuel consumption or fuel prices or several factors that are involved in that, what that will be and how that will result in revenue from sales tax or motor fuel taxes. So their estimation is that is likely to be a decrease in fuel consumption, which would result in less tax revenue collected.
So that would impact our cities and counties more so than the highway fund, the interstates, I suppose.
Correct. So this is a decrease from the Special City and County Highway Fund, and that is a fund that is used as aid to cities and counties for projects.
Is there a breakdown about how it impacts each of the counties or each of the regions in our state?
I don't know that offhand, so I'd have to check. The agency may have that information, but how that breaks out per county, I'm fairly certain there's a formula in statute that dictates how that gets broke out by county, but I'd have to look that up.
Okay, I would appreciate that, mainly because we're having to do sales tax ballots for maintenance of our roads and our own infrastructure in our communities, and I fear that even if we collect that type of revenue, it may not be enough if we are getting less in our own funds from the state. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Committee, further questions? Seeing none, 2024.
All right, Mr. Chairman, moving on to 2024. And we'll be looking on page 10. You'll see the FY 2024 analysis. So I'm moving about midway down the page. You'll see the agency request. The agency requests $2.2 billion, including $1.8 billion from the State Highway Fund in expenditures for FY 2024. This is an all funds decrease of $678.2 million. And a state highway fund decrease of $521 million. That significant difference is largely related to the letting of those projects that occurred in FY23. So there's less expenditures for the letting of those projects in FY24. The request includes 2,283.3 FTE positions, which is unchanged from the FY23 revised estimate. The agency request includes the following adjustments. So you can see item 1, salaries and wages. The request includes an increase of $8.1 million, all from the State Highway Fund for salaries and wages expenditures for FY24. This includes $6.9 million for a pay plan among certain critical positions, such as equipment operators, engineering technicians, equipment mechanics, and professional engineers. The agency indicates the pay plan would affect approximately 1,500 FTE positions, with all positions in the plan receiving at least a 5% increase, and certain positions such as equipment mechanics, civil engineers receiving more. And other increases in that total amount of $8.1 million really relates to adjustments for employer contributions to fringe benefits agency-wide. Looking on item 2, engineering contractual services, the request includes a decrease of $2.5 million in contractual engineering services for FY24. The decrease is attributable to decreased services in the administration program, partially offset by increased services in the transportation and modal support program. Again, FY23, we saw a lot of highway projects that were leaded. which increased the need for engineering contractual services. In FY23, the number of projects leaded goes down, so the engineering contractual services also goes down. Item number 3, heavy equipment. The request includes an increase of $3.5 million for replacement of heavy equipment to support highway maintenance. The agency notes this increase would restore one-time reductions for heavy equipment in FY23. So if you'll remember in FY23, we talked about the agency was requesting less because they were able to purchase a large amount in 22. So we sort of get a break in FY23 and FY24. They're requesting to resume their normal funding for the replacement of heavy equipment. Item 4, information technology. Agency requests an increase of $930,000 for development and maintenance of numerous IT platforms throughout the agencies. These relate to collecting traffic safety data, project management, grant management, bridge inspection, and right-of-way land inventory. Item 5, transportation planning technology development. The request includes a decrease of $1 million from the Transportation Technology Development Fund in aid to local governments for development of innovative technologies in vehicular and air transportation. Item 6 is aviation. The request includes an increase of $2.9 billion for the Kansas Airport Improvement Program, which provides grants to local airports for facilities improvements. Item 7, public transit. Agency, the request includes a decrease of $3.6 million in assistance for public transit. Decrease is attributable to decreased funding from the Federal Transit Administration. Item 8, rail service improvement fund. The request includes a decrease of $13.4 million for rehabilitation and safety improvements to railroads. Decreases are partially attributed to decreased federal funding. Short line rail improvement. The revised estimate includes a decrease of $7.2 million for short line rail improvements. An annual transfer of $5 million from the State Highway Fund to this fund is scheduled to cease after FY 2023, pursuant to 2020 SB 173, which is the Ike Transportation Plan. Local projects, a request includes an increase of $665,875 from the Special City and County Highway Fund, which provides formula grants to cities and counties for preservation and improvements of local roads, streets, and bridges. Item 7, we get into the large construction projects. Item 11, construction expansion, capital improvements. The request includes a decrease of $729.4 million for expansion projects. Item 12, construction preservation. The request includes an increase of $23.1 million in capital improvements preservation projects to maintain roads and bridges in as-built condition. Item 13, construction modernization. The request includes an increase of $173.3 million in capital improvements for modernization projects to bring roads up to current standards. Moving on to the next page to item 14, construction local. The request includes an increase of $10.5 million in capital improvements for local projects. The increase is attributable to increased funding for federal aid projects, partially offset by decreases in the City Connecting Link program and the local bridge transfer program. Item 15 is buildings. The request includes a decrease of $8.7 million in capital improvement expenditures for buildings. Decrease is primarily attributed to expenditures for the initial phase of constructing the District 1 headquarters in Topeka that do not reoccur in FY24. Debt service will see a decrease of $135.5 million for debt service and payment on bonds. You'll see other adjustments. And then we'll get to the governor's recommendation. The governor recommends $2.1 billion, including $1.8 billion from the State Highway Fund. This is an all funds decrease of $4.7 million and a state highway decrease of $433,415, below the FY24 requested amount. Recommendation includes 2,283.3 FTE positions, which is unchanged from the requested number. So what was the governor's specific recommendations? Governor recommendation includes the following adjustments. Item 18 relates to salaries and wages. The recommendation includes a decrease of $433,415, all from the State Highway Fund, for the agency's plan for salary increases for certain critical positions. The decrease is due to the governor recommending a modified plan that reduces pay increases for civil engineers from 25% to 17.5%. Item 19, again, we see an adjustment related to a revised highway revenue estimate. The recommendation includes a decrease of $4.2 million, all from the Special City and County Highway Fund, which is budgeted as aid to local governments. The revenue decrease is due to decreased revised estimates from the Highway Revenue Estimating Group. If you look on page 13, there is some details on the agency's supplemental request in FY 2023. If you'll remember, that request was for essentially inflation costs related to improvements of buildings. That totaled $8.8 million. The governor did recommend that supplemental request. I would direct the committee. You'll see the next series of pages addresses a few special topics and then breaks down each program within the Department of Transportation, provides you a 10-year history of expenditures for that program, and provides performance measures for that program. At each member's seat, there was a stapled packet of performance measures provided by the agency. I would lastly direct you to page 27 in the budget analysis that we were looking at, and this provides additional details on capital improvements for the agencies, capital improvements related to buildings. So you can see a list of the building projects for the agency in FY 23 and 24. On the bottom of page 21, you'll see the agency submits a revised estimate of $33.2 million, all from the State Highway Fund, for capital improvements for buildings in FY 23. Then this is an increase of $10.2 million above the FY 2023 approved amount. Increase is primarily attributed to that agency's supplemental request of $8.8 million. Of that $8.8 million, $5.5 million is attributed to some inflation costs for the District 1 headquarters construction. $2.7 million is related to inflation costs related to sub-area modernization efforts, and an increase of $600,000 for rehabilitation and repair. So this is routine rehabilitation and repair of the agency's multiple buildings. You'll see on the next page, 28, a description of each of those projects. They involve re-roofing efforts in Anthony, Ashland, Belleville, Manhattan, Norton, Pratt, Troy, Waverly. They involve sub-area modernization. So some of the sub-area shops, many of them were built in the 1950s and 60s. So this is an effort to update those facilities. Sub-area modernization locations for FY 23 would include Beloit, Blaine, Iola, and Sharon Springs. Agency does list information on land purchases. The agency requests $456,756 for the purchase of land in FY 2023. This involves land purchases in Garnett, Independence, Salina, and Topeka. Agency's requesting funding for a chemical storage facility in Pratt. These facilities are requested when the current capabilities do not exist. And then the last item, or I'm sorry, the second to last item, you'll see details on the construction of the District 1 headquarters in Topeka. This project was approved by the 2022 legislature for FY 23, so you're seeing it here appear again as part of the revised estimate. Agency requests $16.7 million for the initial phase of a 2-year project to construct a new District 1 headquarters in Topeka in FY 23. The total project cost is estimated at $24.2 million. So that's spread across 2 years. Expenditures for FY 23 are for construction of the District 1 maintenance shop and supply station. You'll see on the next paragraph, the current complex located at 121 Southwest 21st Street in Topeka includes office and maintenance shops originally constructed in 1934. Agency indicates the current facility is inadequate to store modern vehicles and requires transport of heavy equipment through the congested urban core of Topeka. This construction project would relocate and consolidate on a single site various aspects of the facility to include the headquarters office, maintenance shop, supply stock rooms, and these would move to Southwest 21st Street and Rice Road near the I-70 interchange on the east side of Topeka. And future plans would include relocating the District 1 Materials Lab to that site in the out years. And finally, at the top of page 29, you'll see some information on area shop bay extension and electrical updates. Agency is expending money to update area shops. And each year you'll see a featured site for that. For FY23, the scheduled area updates are for the Wichita Hillside shop. And the governor concurs with the agency's revised estimate for capital improvements in FY23. In FY24, you'll see many of the same projects being requested to include that second year in expenditures for the construction of the District 1 headquarters. However, the agency requests $7.5 million for the final phase, and that is a decrease from what was requested, the $16.7 million in FY23. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my summary. I'm happy to stand for questions for FY24 or any other aspect.
Any questions on 2024? Senator Corson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you look at page 12 on number 18, I just had a question on if we're trying to get folks to market rate salaries, do you know, or could we find out how close we would be to market rate for civil engineers if we did what the governor recommends, which is 17.5%, or if we did what was in the original agency recommendation of 25%. I'm just curious how close those would put us respectively to market rate for those positions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I can see if I can find any market studies that indicate how our current rate of 17.5 or the proposed rate of 17.5 compares. The agency may have some additional details. I think they've done some analysis on what those comparables might be. But yes, I can look for that.
Committee, further questions? Senator Tyson.
Information on the land purchase, if I may.
Mr. Chair, any specific land purchase or?
There's 3 of them listed here: Garnett, Independence, Salina, and Topeka. It's got a fiscal note. They're requesting about less than $500 million. What's the land being purchased for? What's the use? How much tax will it take off the rolls?
Yeah, I think generally, and I would have to follow this up and investigate a little bit more. I think generally those land purchases are related to additional easement for the highways themselves, or if there's a prospective site where the agency may need to construct a site for mixing materials or for highway repairs. But I can try to acquire more information.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Understandable. I just want to have a grasp of what we're looking at here. Thank you.
Committee, further questions? Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Following up with the question from Senator Corson, on I think page 6 and a couple of other pages where at number 3, for example, it says the agency indicates position decrease due to difficulty filling vacant equipment operator and engineer positions. And then on the other one, it says we are looking at shifting from 25% to 17%, I believe. It seems like you would want to have, if it's a competitive salary we're looking at when we don't have enough engineers, is there something that's not stated here, or these different types of engineering positions as opposed to the ones that are where we're looking at the pay scale a little differently?
So I think the when we say the agency is having difficulty filling equipment operator and engineering positions, those are various types of engineers, whether they are civil engineers or engineer technicians, so there's various levels of them. And then as the agency's initial proposed pay increase mentioned a 25% for civil engineers, and you can see the governor is recommending that rather than 25, it be a 17.5. I can only say in other instances I've seen that when there is an effort to sort of maintain consistency among position classifications across state government. So if there's other comparable positions, there's often an effort to maintain consistency of that. I'm not sure there's a lot of other there is possibly civil engineers at other state agencies, but so I think that's a general context. I hope that.
Is there a problem that we are decreasing these positions? Because I feel like engineers are pretty, you need quite a few engineers, especially in KDOT, whether it's mechanical, electrical, civil, whatever it might be. Are we just not filling those positions, or are some people wearing 2 or 3 hats in those departments?
So the agency may have more information on this, but it is my understanding that it's straight difficulty filling those positions. There is other opportunities, either that their candidates, when hiring, can find other more
Out of state, I suppose, or out
that's part
of
of it.
private industry, maybe.
But the initial answer to your question is the agency has indicated it's just straight difficulty in filling those positions.
I just didn't want there to be work that's not being done because of lack of positions. That was my only concern. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Calvin Reed, and I'm the Acting Secretary of Transportation for KDOT right now. And I will try to answer some of the questions, Senator Reddy. And if you need more clarification, I'll try to provide more. First of all, I thank you for acknowledging how important engineers are to the work that we do at KDOT. They are extremely important. It is I will say it is a very sluggish market right now. There are not a lot of engineers in the market. So there are a lot of consultants, there are a lot of cities and counties, and there are KDOT all vying for these positions. So it is a high demand position, and we are having a hard time competing for those positions, along with other positions, and I'll talk about a little bit more. And then Senator Tyson, we did a little bit of research regarding weed removal, and so I have some numbers for you. So our 5-year average, we have spent 11,000 hours, man-hours, on weed removal. That results in about $574,000 in KDOT staff. And then we've also done about $1.3 million in contract weed removal. What I will say is that weed removal is going to be one of those things that it's going to be very sensitive to our staffing in certain areas. So some areas may have staff to go out and really address weed removal where others won't. So it's going to be very sensitive to our local staffing in any of the individual areas or sub areas.
I think we'll hold questions to the end.
Yeah, okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So, kicking it off, we're going to talk about a lot of things that Merle discussed, go into a little bit more detail on some things, and really just give a higher level on some other things. So, first and foremost, I do want to address our funding. Our funding, our revenue streams come from several different categories, and you can see that the revenue really falls into 2 different buckets. Our state highway fund, which is what we're going to talk about today, and then the special city and county highway fund, which is not in KDOT's control, but it is a separate bucket that gets distributed by statute to the cities and counties. So that's what we discussed earlier. That is not in KDOT's control to do that. That is statutorial. And then in the state highway fund, we really have two ways that the money gets spent. That's on transfers out. I'll discuss that a little bit, but I'm going to spend most of the time really talking about that lower right-hand box, which is our budget. In terms of revenue sources, Overall revenues are projected to remain steady in fiscal year 24 compared to fiscal year 23 at about $2 billion. Sales tax revenue continues to be the key funding source for the State Highway Fund, and it amounts to about 1/3 of the KDOT's revenue stream. It is estimated the State Highway Fund will receive $30 million more from sales tax revenue in fiscal year 24 compared to fiscal year 23 estimates. And then, some of the other revenue that's not listed there includes special vehicle permits, interest, insurance reimbursements, and recovery of prior year expenditures. The one thing that I did not mention on the previous slide, all of our revenue streams are constitutionally protected with the exception of the sales tax revenue, which, as I said, is the largest portion of our revenue. So looking at it historically, it's good to see that sales tax revenues have increased over time, and we continue to see that increase, and we project an increase into fiscal year 23 and 24. Overall, our total revenues have stayed at about $2.0 billion for the last several years. At the same time, motor fuels tax had been steady for about 5 years with a slight decrease projected in fiscal year 23 and 24. That decrease is probably because of higher fuel prices, which have driven down the number of vehicle miles traveled on our highways. Federal funds are reimbursement based, and we expect them to go up after fiscal year 24 with several very large projects let this year and in the next couple years. Now regarding transfers, ordinary transfers are listed there in yellow. Ordinary transfers are those transfers to other state agencies that really help support the mission of KDOT. The governor and legislature have been working to progressively lower the amount of extraordinary transfers, and we're able to eliminate these transfers for fiscal year 23, and we expect to eliminate them also for fiscal year 24. So we would just ask for continued support for eliminating these extraordinary transfers. It helps for KDOT to continue to deliver on its mission and goals that were envisioned in the IKE program. And just real quick, what these transfers look like. For the most part, these transfers go to two main agencies, which are the Kansas Highway Patrol and the Kansas Department of Revenue. Like I said, KDOT continues to support these transfers as they do help deliver the mission of our agency. The only new proposed transfer for fiscal year 24 is a $12.6 million transfer to Kansas Department of Revenue for the replacement and modernization of license plates. And this modernization will assist primarily law enforcement campaigns, which are critical to the safety of the traveling public. Now moving to expenditures. From a programmatic standpoint, we expect the majority of our expenditures, as Merle indicated, in construction. Construction will account for about 2/3 of our fiscal year 2024 budget. And so just for clarification, numbers shown includes the cost to let these projects, but also the cost to engineer them, to inspect them, and also the cost to acquire right-of-way for these projects. Budgeted expenditures for fiscal year 24 construction are about $528 million less than what we expect for fiscal year 23. And this is really due to two very large projects that were let in fiscal year 23, which include the US 69 Express project in Overland Park and the Wichita North Junction project down in Sedgwick County. Now, another step into our budget structure, we essentially have two different lines in our budget. We have the limited side, which is based on legislative appropriations, and then the unlimited side, which is really managed by our cash flow. The agency operations budget falls into the limited side, and I'll talk a lot more about our agency operations budget here in a minute. So that includes expenditures like salaries and benefits, contractual services, commodities, capital outlay. KDOT is authorized to revise expenditures among these categories as we discussed, but it cannot exceed the total dollar limitation for agency operations that is authorized by the legislature. So KDOT has requested authorization from the legislature to exceed its operation budget only twice in the last 10 years. Those requests were related to statewide OITS modernization programs. So KDOT is requesting for fiscal year 23 agency operations budget to remain at $312 million, so no change. However, KDOT is requesting a $9 million capital improvement supplemental, as Merle detailed. And that falls outside of our agency operations. So initial estimates for fiscal year 23 capital improvement projects were originally made in July of 2021. Since that time, KDOT has seen price increases of upwards of 50%, and so that has necessitated that supplemental. The agency is requesting this additional funding so that those approved projects can continue without delaying or reducing scope of other projects. So taking a historical look at our agency operations budget since fiscal year 2012, you'll see that we are upwards of $300 million, which really gets us back to about 10 years ago at the beginning of the T-Works program. So what we're seeing right now is similar to what we would have seen 10 years ago. And when you look at how we've managed our budget, we have managed our budget well over the last couple of years. In fiscal year 2021 and 2022, we spent nearly all of what was appropriated to the agency. What this means is that we are doing a good job of estimating what we need to the governor and to the legislature, and at the same time, we've been able to manage our budget within what you have approved for us. So as I noted earlier, we have had a substantial increase to our overall budget, and that is also reflected in a minor increase in our agency operations budget to help deliver the IKE program. So we've had a considerable ramp up, as you can see on this slide, to nearly $2.8 billion in fiscal year 2023. And as I said, that's a bit of an outlier year for the program because of a couple of very large projects being let in fiscal year 23. But even though our agency operations budget has increased in fiscal year 23 and 24, it still represents a lower share of our overall budget compared to 5 or 6 years ago. Now talking about our fiscal year 24 agency and operations budget. So KDOT is requesting an increase for our fiscal year 24 budget compared to fiscal year 23 of about $14 million or 4.6%. This increase is in line with inflation estimates by the Consensus Revenue Estimating Group, which estimates inflations for 23 and 24 to be about 5%. So some of the summaries of what we are proposing for our fiscal year 24 budget include an increase of $8.1 million for salaries and wages. As we discussed earlier, the pay increase was absorbed by our fiscal year 23 budget, or we project it to be absorbed by our fiscal year 23 budget through anticipated salary savings, being not able to fill all of the positions. But since the need for those positions has not changed, we will continue to ask for the same number of positions, but at a higher salary rate, necessitating that higher salary number. In terms of contractual services, this includes additional expenditures for IT contracts and engineering consulting services, which are necessary to deliver the IKE program. And then capital outlay primarily includes restoration of one-time reduction to fiscal year 2023 because we were able to pre-spend in fiscal year 2022 some of our obligation for capital outlay. We were able to reduce in fiscal year 23 and shift that. We're going to request that $4.3 million be restored in fiscal year 2024. So a little bit about staffing. It's been a big topic of conversation, obviously here and within the agency. So staffing levels at KDOT have been steadily dropping, and I will say it is probably one of the biggest risks to delivering the IKE program is having a well-qualified and experienced staff to be able to deliver on the mission of the agency. So recruiting and retaining experienced and qualified workforce is obviously essential to the to us performing our fiduciary responsibilities of oversight, planning, designing, and maintaining our transportation system. The last two legislative sessions have had across-the-board pay increases for state employees. And then as discussed, Governor Kelly has also issued an executive order which has resulted in enhanced pay for over 1,500 employees in what we would call hard-to-fill positions. And I'll talk about that more here in the next couple slides. So all this has been very helpful, but we are still, dealing with issues in terms of recruiting and retention. We're tracking the performance of how these pay increases have helped us recruit and retain, but continued support for state employee salaries, I think, is essential for us to continue to deliver this IKE program.
Mr. Secretary, we're about to lose the room here in a few minutes, so if you
Okay.
can roll through, you'd be welcome to come back and present later on, or
Yep. How much time do I have?
about 4 minutes and a couple of questions.
Okay. Yep, I can go through real quick. So let's keep going and talk about the targeted increase, because I know that was a discussion. So in the fall, KDOT presented to the governor some market analysis of private sector and other public sector employees, and determined that we had about 1,500 positions, equipment operators, engineering technicians, and engineers, just to name a few, were some that we targeted. We requested anywhere from a 5 to 17.5% pay increase for those, and the governor did allow that by executive order. And then let's go ahead and go to the end. And I can come back and answer any questions regarding any of the items that we're skipping over. But let's talk about performance management real quick. So obviously, budget is important, but what we need to be able to show taxpayers is that they are getting the bang for their buck, right? This is taxpayer money that is being spent, so performance of that taxpayer money is important. One of the biggest assets that we have in this state is our state highway system. And so understanding the performance of the state highway system is critical to understanding how to budget for the state highway system. And so what we have been able to do over the last couple of years, without getting into a lot of details, is to revamp our pavement performance metrics and to relook at them so we understand really what our pavement performance is. Prior metrics were really just capturing superficial information and not understanding what was going on underneath. And so the decisions we were making on our pavement were really about good surface, but not good long-term performance. And so now with our new metric, we'll be able to capture with better information and better thought about what long-term pavement performance might look like if we look at the below the surface information. And so we have a new tool that's available for anybody to go look at. I advise go look at this website and run your own scenarios, report back to us your thoughts. And then just finally about performance measures in general, KDOT has revamped our performance measures by looking at kind of some top-level measures, including pavement performance. And these really are trying to capture overall, what we think are the key aspects of delivering a transportation program and what KDOT's mission is. We have a new website you guys can go out and take a look at. But we take the idea of performance measurement seriously and have revamped that and continue to look at improvements to that. So with that, I will stop, Mr. Chairman. I'll accept any questions, and then if you guys would like for me to come back and expand on any of this, I would be happy to.
Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would ask that you look into the weed program. The state is the worst neighbors, noxious weed, Wyandotte, Johnson County, all over the state. Also, I'm quite confused at the report. We have expenditures approved and actual, and those numbers do not mesh up with your presentation.
Okay.
And it's quite a difference, 2.8 billion to 2 billion. If you, I don't know, we probably don't have time, Mr. Chairman, but if you could look into that and get back to us on a
You
response.
can come back tomorrow. We'll have a quick hearing and we could have more time if you're available.
Yeah, I'll have to check my schedule, but I should be able to be here tomorrow, yeah.
Excellent. Senator Schallenberger.
Sales tax, how much sales tax goes into the highway fund?
If we go back to that
Is
slide,
it a penny or a half a penny or
as a percentage,
No, it's about
however you want?
16%.
I believe it's
16% of the sales tax?
18%, is that right?
Yeah, we went up last year.
Yeah. I
Does
believe
the
it's
elimination of sales tax on certain goods affect the highway fund? Okay, and can you get me the formula that is used to determine the local,
It's city connecting.
yeah, no, not the
Sorry,
connecting
the
link. but
special city and
Special
county.
highway fund, yeah, if you could give me
absolutely.
that formula.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow. We'll continue our questions. With that, we're adjourned.
Okay.